share screen and then close that one right here.
Yes.
Which one? This one here?
Yep. All right, good evening, everyone. We are still waiting for a couple of members of the Land Use, Housing and Zoning Committee to join, and then we're going to get the meeting started very promptly. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, Layla, we have Mary is on. I know she has to leave early. We're just meeting. We need one more. Oh, we got Mike Greeley, so we've got quorum.
Okay, fantastic. So without further delay, I will ask all panelists to put yourselves on mute, please. And we're going to get going. Sean, if I can ask, yeah, thank you so much. All right, so good evening, everyone. This is the Land Use, Housing and Zoning Committee of Manhattan Community Board 5. My name is Leila Logiziko. I'm the chair. I am joined by Aaron Ford, who is the vice chair of the committee, as well as the members of the committee. We are here tonight for our monthly meeting. We do not have an application tonight. We have two items on the agenda. One is a presentation by the Garment District, and the second item is a consideration of the casinos citing, as we do understand that the citing commission on casinos that is part of the Gaming Commission is considering 3 downstate casino licenses. And some of those may end up in Community Board 5, and there are, other sites that have been that are under consideration or have announced that they would be interested in securing one of those licenses. So we are going to have a discussion. At that point, we will start with the discussion. We will see if it warrants an action at this particular meeting. We understand that we may have a little bit of time to actually get to a recommendation. So as of now, both items are for discussion, while we appreciate and understand that the casino item may turn into an action item if the committee feels that it is the proper way of proceeding. So with that being said, we will start the meeting tonight with a presentation from the Garment Business Improvement District. We are joined by Barbara Blair, who is their executive director. And rather than give an introduction, I will actually just turn it to Barbara to give us this land use presentation. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Leila. And thank you so much to the committee for giving us this time to present to you. I'm here with my associate, Frank Fish from BFJ Planning. And so the reason we're here, we're trying to come to you very, very early to get feedback for some thoughts that we have about how to improve the Garment District and elevate it. During COVID, the Garment District was really seriously impacted, all of you know, by all the individuals who were placed in hotels in the neighborhood. And it had an incredibly serious impact because it was a new population that was an overlay to a population that was already here. We have about 18 social services in the neighborhood between 35th Street, 41st Street, 5th Avenue, and 9th Avenue, which is a very small area, anchored by 2 major transportation hubs. We have needle exchanges, 3 needle exchanges, methadone clinic, parole board, homeless hotels, supportive housing. So when that population moved in, it just destroyed the neighborhood. I mean, there's no other way to put it because there were no tenants here. The neighborhood is pretty much all office tenants. There are only about 3,000 residents in the entire district. And so when people started coming back after COVID, the office workers in the neighborhood are only at about 43%. Oh, okay. Only at about 43% returned. And one of the things that's happening is they're coming back to the offices, they're looking around and they're seeing this incredible social disorder on the streets. And because there's so few office workers and almost no residents, the social disorder is glaring. The compounding that is the fact that the ground floor retail is really not sustainable if you don't diversify who the stakeholders are in the neighborhood. So we've had many tenants, and it's not an exaggeration, I can name names of property owners and tenants who come back and say, forget it. We are not coming back to this neighborhood. We're scared. It's dangerous. We just lost, Goral just lost an $800,000 tenant who moved to Grand Central because the office workers refused to come back to the building. So what we're really thinking about is, where do we go from here? The garment district before COVID, I should say, the growth in jobs in the neighborhood was really healthy. We were up to about 149,000 jobs in the neighborhood in very diverse business sectors. The garment industry itself, manufacturing, not the whole industry, manufacturing, had diminished to about 2,000 jobs in the entire neighborhood and 1.8% of the space in the neighborhood. So what we had were a lot of business services and creative services and those kinds of things. We're down to about 124,000 jobs. The problem is people aren't coming back. It's scary. So, we were asking ourselves, what can we do to, first of all, achieve a 24/7 neighborhood so the streets are activated at night, and so the ground floor retail is sustainable, and that we get better retail. We have a lot of retail vacancies right now, but so does all of New York City. And, one of the things that we had always hoped for was to get residential in the neighborhood, because you diversify the stakeholders. They're here at night. They patronize the restaurants. There's activity on the streets. So we wondered, can we even do that? Can any of these buildings be converted to residential? Does it work? And so we turned to Frank Fish and BFJ Planning and asked them if they would please do a study to look at the feasibility of converting some of this office space to residential. And we're really looking at the entire district, because and then I'm gonna, I'd love to have a discussion with members of the committee if you're willing. We really need to elevate this neighborhood. The neighborhood is going down the tubes, and there's no identifiable marketplace on the horizon for these buildings. You've got all kinds of offices coming online in Penn Station, in whatever form that's going to happen. You have One Vanderbilt, you have Hudson Yards, you have Macy's. So you have this incredible Class A office space. And what we see people doing is, because of the hybrid model, they'll take less space, but more expensive space. So they'll go to a better building, which means our Class A buildings on the Avenue are now Class B buildings, and our Class B and C buildings are straining to find a market. So Frank, I'm going to turn it over to you and what you learned. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Thank you, Barbara. You hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Thank you. Frank.
If I can share my screen, which I hope I can.
Yes, you should be able to.
Yeah, good. And what I'll do is just give you, by the way, this is a report which Barbara may have sent to you already. So, but if not, we have it, and it's available both online and in hard copy. And I'll just try to use this presentation to summarize it.
Great, and we have not seen it, so
Okay.
for the
All
for the
right.
benefit of members as well as members of the public, feel free to get a little bit into details, not too much.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
have a big item coming up.
Right. Yeah, I can tell you have another item that's a little bit controversial, maybe. Okay. So let's see if I can do this share screen. Go. Right. And
Yes,
good.
we can see your screen.
Okay, very good.
Excellent.
So basically, we were asked to look at the garment district and then look into the residential feasibility in the garment district. I think as all of you probably already know, most of the garment district zoning does not really allow residential. There are some exceptions to that. So just gonna see if I can get this. Yeah, let me just advance that, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. See if I can. Good, thanks. So the report overview is we started over the summer really and into this early fall, and you can see produced this just a draft report on the garment industry. And then let me just a little difficulty here with advancing. Let's see. Sorry. Hold on just a second. I'm having some technical difficulties.
Sure.
Well, one thing I'll add, since Frank walked away, is we're happy to.
I'm sorry.
We're happy to send the study. One thing that came up when we went to Community Board 4, we went for a pre-meeting,
Yeah.
Community Board 4. Oh, go ahead, Frank.
Okay, so the first thing was why this report, and what Barbara pretty much has described a little bit, the why of the report, and that is that and we've just showing here the outline of the Business Improvement District, the Garment BID, and what's happened. We wanted to sort of categorize that why of the Garment District study. And we've used some city planning data and also Department of Labor data. And this was from the left-hand side of this slide is from city planning. This is the Garment District in blue. And you can see here in 1987, when the bid was established, you got 30,000 jobs in the Garment District, according to city planning data. And then Department of Labor gave us in 2020, as you can see there, that's less than 3,000 jobs. So you've got less than 10% of the jobs that were in the Garment District left in the Garment District, according to the Department of Labor. But what's also even more astounding, or it was to me, is you can see the pie chart, which is the land use mix. And that is, I did expect the Garment District in terms of as a mix, square foot, gross, development area, to have more than 1.8%. It's got, as you can see in the gray, it only represents about 1.8% of the floor area in the Garment District BID. Most of it, as you can see, is in blue, is in office, but the office market, as I'm sure all know, is a fairly market that's contracted a little bit and is a little bit soft. There are other uses there, but the main one right now is office uses. So that's sort of the why. It's gone down to sort of a remnant of itself historically. So as a result, you have garment industry that's now less than 2%. You've got an office market that's a little bit on the soft side, high vacancies. And so we had our associates at Urbanomics, they're an affiliate of BFJ, and we share space with them, do a market overview. By the way, the office market, there's various figures on it because there's different sources for the vacancy rates, but we believe that it is somewhere between 17.6 that we're showing here up to 23%. It depends on the different data sources. So the implications for the garment district are continued high vacancies and, quite frankly, lower rents. And you can see some of the rent. We've got a different sample size, different avenues for rents here. But basically, the rent structure has been hurt, and the office market remains weak. And it means also then that the retail market not only is the usual issue with the retail market, and the Amazon effect is exacerbated by the vacancy rate and a lack of office activity, a lack of things happening in the existing buildings in the district. So they also looked at residential, and I think this is probably not a surprise to anyone. The residential market remains high. The residential markets, the demand exceeds the supply in Manhattan, and the implications are that residential is almost, I don't want to say it's guaranteed to be successful, but it is the strongest market element now that we have. And we believe that more residential use would improve the quality of life on the street. Then that is something that the garment district, as you heard from Barbara, is concerned with. So that's the market overview. We also feel it fits into the mayoral priority that the mayor's announced actually last summer and then reinforced this fall to encourage residential conversions in Midtown. And so we looked at the development potential in the garment district. And we looked at it in two particular areas, but the whole district, which is outlined here. Here's the current zoning in the district. The overlay of the garment district itself as a zone is in the dark blue area. So that development potential, we had to look at a comparable. What would we use? And in talking to the board and talking to Barbara and others and our market people, said, let's look at the financial. By the way, I'm not presenting here anything that I believe is, there's no exact comparable, but in terms of comps, the financial district struck us as one, and Chelsea also struck many of the board members as another. So we looked at them, what happened when zoning allowed residential down in the financial district. And over a 10-year period, we found that the financial district, about 10% of the gross floor space was converted in a 10-year period to residential. And then in Chelsea, it was just a little bit faster paced. It was about 12%. So if you apply those to the garment district boundaries to the bid, if you apply the rent, 10% and 12% conversion rates, you get there. The figures listed about 26. I hate to use an exact figure because these are estimates, and so the 2688 to the 3,225. We've just in round numbers have referred to that in an executive summary as about 3,000 units. We think there's that potential if we rely on what has happened in other districts in New York City. And then over a longer period of time, a 25-year period of time, that number, of course, would grow over time. And we've applied the same, a similar rate structure, but over a longer period of time. And it would give us, about really 5,000 units, that 5376 to the 6720 there at the lower right-hand side. So we think in the next 10 years, the more reliable number, because it's just closer to us, is probably around 3,000. Now, there's many 3,000 units. There's many factors that can affect that, the economy, and whether we have a recession, or not, and how you come out of that recession. So there's factors that will affect it, but we think that that's a reasonable sort of estimate for the future. And then chapter 4 of our report, when you get a chance to see it, is how do we get here? How do we get there? Because the major issue in the garment district overlay, for instance, is that the underlying zoning, with an exception that in one of the zones here, residential buildings are allowed, residential units in buildings of less than 70,000 square feet. That is proved not to work, not to make, it hasn't resulted in the change that city planning hoped. And so in the short term, what we're recommending here, the first item you see there, is a text change for the special garment center overlay district. And we presented this idea to the chair at city planning, to Don Grodnick and his staff in the Manhattan office. So that would be a short-term change. It's a text change, which would allow residential in the garment district. And then we also suggested to city planning that longer term, we realized this would be a map change, is on the far right-hand side of this map between 5th and 6th Avenues. You've got the M16 district. We think that that district, and again, is a district that is ripe really for consideration by city planning. We think it could be easily a mixed-use district. There are mixed-use C5 districts around it. So if they made that change, those districts would allow residential. This current the M16 could allow residential. The tax incentive program is not an issue as much for the city. That, as you know, is controlled by the state legislature and the governor. So, we don't know if any type of tax incentives would be adopted in the next legislative session or not. Certainly they help in terms of conversions. And then city planning suggested to us this 4th dot point, and that's the public realm improvements that, and Barbara can talk to those in some detail at the end of this. The public realm improvements would include, what's happened, as you know, in the garment district is a DOT put in some very good changes for bike lanes, but they're temporary. They were meant to be temporary, and they're sort of New Jersey barriers painted. So it's sort of not a permanent, it's not a permanent improvement. So there's a lot of public realm improvements in terms of sidewalks, lighting, and that type of improvement that's been done to the north in Times Square and to the south in Herald Square that could be done in the garment district. But the key is to open the door. And that's the first dot point with the garment district text change. And that's what we focused on in discussions with both city planning and the borough president. So that's the thing that we wanted to stress. We think that could be done in a short term of perhaps 2 years, roughly. It might not require, we don't know, this would be up to a call both by city planning and the council. It might be able to be done in that period of time through the city's ULURP process and be achievable. So, and then there's an executive summary to this report, which, by the way, I think I've just given this executive summary, so I won't bore you with the executive summary, but the report's basically in those 4 chapters, sort of why the report. I think Barbara's covered that pretty well. What to expect from the market. I think there's no surprise there. The strongest market by far is residential. And what is the potential for residential use? We think it's about 3,000. And then how to achieve this short-term strategy, text change for the overlay district, and then long-term, a map change for the M16. So that's sort of the presentation, and maybe I'll turn this back to Barbara.
May I just add one thing? Because one thing that came up at Community Board 4 is we're talking about conversions. And one of the reasons we believe that these will be conversions, but not, knocking down buildings and new development, is because most of these buildings are built in excess of the allowable FAR. So if you were as a developer to go into one of these buildings, you're going to get more space than you would by knocking it down and building a new one. So because that came up at CB4, we are in the midst right now of mapping all the buildings that are in excess of the allowable FAR now, so you can see, you know, how large the buildings are. And then also the soft sites, because we don't have a lot of sites where you could do huge developments. We have a lot of sites where there's a two-story building and there's a 7-Eleven and a White Castle on the ground floor, or, you know, unfortunately, we've just mapped all the vape weed shops that are opening up, and the Garment District once again has the highest density of weed shops of anywhere. And it's because the neighborhood has historically been treated as a sacrifice zone by the city and state of New York, because A, there was no residential there to object, but B, it was sort of a single industry neighborhood and a manufacturing zone. So you could just dump all these uses there. The problem is it's continuing to happen. So our plan, we're coming to you right now about residential and your inputs about residential. But the overarching plan is threefold. It is to get residential in the neighborhood, but then also we've applied to the state and we've been to the commissioner of DOT about permanent capital improvements. So we don't have painted asphalt that we're calling a park. And the third is going to our elected officials and demanding some kind of response to the social disorder that's in the streets. And again, a lot of that has to do with the states, but it's really, I mean, we need to figure out, when I say we, I'm talking about you and us as a community together, what's going to happen to this neighborhood if we don't react?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much, Barbara. And thank you, Frank, for a great and very informative presentation. To frame the conversation, what I would like to bring up to everybody's attention is that there is a state mechanism that actually was adopted in the last legislative session, and there has been a push for a state program to convert Class B and Class C office space in this particular area. I mean, the area that the state has identified goes, I think, from 60th to 34th, maybe. Don't quote me on the exact boundaries, and we have voted consistently against the state measure for the very reason that it would not be a comprehensive zoning. So if we are going to talk about a conversion, we want it to be comprehensive. We want it to be an actual neighborhood so that we can really measure the impacts of such conversion. So, I just want to frame that for people rather than having the knee-jerk reaction of saying, well, no, we don't want residential because it's a manufacturing district. I would encourage everyone to think about, the fact that there may be other programs to achieve those kinds of conversions that would be actually much less desirable. So with that little bit of framing, let's open up to questions from members of the committee. Do we have any questions? Mary, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a factual question. Close to 27% seems to fall into this category of other. Could you just give us an idea of what that encompasses?
Go ahead, Frank.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Barbara. Yeah.
I was going to say, we have a lot of social services. We also have the Port Authority, which is a huge building it's within our boundaries. And then there are a couple of churches. What else would be in there, Frank?
The post office is kind of a nice, fairly substantial building. So it's institutional and, basically
police, NYPD,
police, NYPD, right?
Yeah.
Miscellaneous uses, but they're significant. Some of them are significant.
Great. Thank you. Mary, do you have a follow-up?
No, that's great. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Renee, you get the second question.
Hi, thank you, Leila. I'm wondering, have you reached out and are you in conversation with a lot of the nonprofits who have been looking at trying to convert to residential some of the empty spaces? Primarily hotels, but perhaps office buildings?
Barbara, I'll defer to you
no.
on the,
Yeah,
on the
I mean,
nonprofits, yeah.
Yeah. Do you mean what kind of nonprofits? I mean, the answer to the question, Renee, is no, we haven't. What we did, I'll tell you where we are right now. We've been to Councilmember Abacher to do an initial vetting of this idea. Councilmember Powers, we've been to Dan Garodnick. We've sent this to the New York committee to ask them, one of the problems that we have in this neighborhood, and it's because of the history of the neighborhood. I mean, it was built to be a single industry neighborhood, but it's changed over time. But one of the problems with New York City planning is they should be looking at a comprehensive plan. In other words, if it were me, I would be telling Penn Station, you're spending like zillions of dollars, whatever the improvements are, the streetscape improvements, they have to go from 34th Street all the way up to 42nd Street and connect them. We have maps where you can see every contiguous neighborhood, north, south, east, and west, has had billions in public and private dollars. The Garment District has never had $1 of public money. So the idea is, how are we a Midtown West area and not this sort of black hole in the middle that literally when you cross the line from the north side of 41st Street to the south side. But no, we haven't spoken to any nonprofits. I mean, frankly, I assumed it would be a property owner that would do these conversions.
So I think, Renee, are you referring to non-for-profit housing organizations that do use the state program to do conversions? Yeah, my understanding, and I'm speaking under Frank and Barbara's control, but I don't think that the program has been used. I will leave it at that. I don't think the program has been used. Let's see if we have other questions. I have a couple of questions of my own. Maybe I'm going to shoot the first one. Frank, can you actually tell us what you're referring to when you mentioned the Chelsea conversion? Which rezoning are you referring to? Is it the West Chelsea? Is it the Ladies Mile conversion?
No, not West Chelsea. Yeah, it's not our office is here in Ladies Mile, and or the historic district. So it's more west, what you just referred to as West Chelsea.
Okay, so it is West Chelsea. Yeah. And for financial district, we know very well what you're referring to. Can you tell us if any of these districts have a large number of landmark buildings, or if they are historic districts?
Well, I was just down in the financial district. It reminds me that part of South Street Seaport, part of the financial district, does have some very significant historic buildings. I think that I'm not as expert on historic in West Chelsea, but we could easily get that. We just did a study for the Landmarks Conservancy on the landmark buildings, but there are buildings in West Chelsea that are landmarked.
Because yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
I'm just trying to draw a correlation between the rate of conversion and the fact that these districts may be landmark historic districts, or they have a large number of historic buildings. Because the other comp that I want to bring to the attention of the committee is actually the Ladies Mile historic district. It was rezoned, so it is a historic district. It was designated in 1986, but then subsequently in 2005, I think, or 2004, it was rezoned. And the rezoning was, from 22nd to 17, and from 5th to 6th. I don't know that it included the avenues, but roughly, and it was an M16 district, so it was manufacturing. It was known as the photo district, and there was a lot of photo studios, and that was the kind of manufacturing use where they would process films. This industry was totally dying, and then when it was rezoned, there was this district had actually a large number of vacant sites, so it was really prime for actually seeing some residential development because there was just no market for any manufacturing use. And what we saw in this district is that these vacant sites, typical soft sites, were developed, but because there was a preservation effect from the landmark status, we did not see any demolition, meaning that some lower buildings did not become soft sites because they protected their landmark. But my understanding is that we saw actually fairly little conversion.
I
The
think
use
now,
didn't really change.
yeah.
So I would be curious to see if we can add some of this data into your comps to have a sense of, a district that was manufacturing, that was converted to, now it's a C64A district, and it has seen, like all the new construction has been residential with a R10 equivalent. There is, it is a landmark district, so we have some pretty good design guidelines, baked in. There's a building height of, wall height, total building height in place, and I think it's fair to say that it is considered as a successful rezoning by most.
Yeah, I think you're talking about a district where I'm speaking from now. Our office is what you're looking at in the background is the north side of 19th Street. I'm at 19th and 5th. We're in what was an old department store in the Ladies Mile Historic District. So by the way, the area has become, as you just well described, a tremendous success. But what has happened here is you've got a mix. You've had significant residential conversions in this district. We share space here with Perkins Eastman, who Barbara's met, the architect that has done a lot of these conversions. And we've used him to look also at the garment district. So we think there's it actually is a very good. I didn't think of my own home here. That's a good suggestion for us because the garment district, our staff loves working here because what's happened is with residential coming in, it's put life on the street and it's reinvigorated the restaurant market, aside from Danny Myers, who has began his empire here. I shouldn't describe it that way. Began his very good, restaurants. And so we have a mix of uses now, and that mix of uses have made this very successful. And I think that's a model for the garment district because you have a combination now of very high vacancy rates, which this area one time had. And by allowing residential, this area significantly changed. There's a lot of loft conversions here. And I think the thing about the conversions here is it did not lead to much demolition because the buildings themselves here are substantial buildings. And they could be, there are some different, as there are in the garment district, there's different building types and some can be more easily converted. And some have remained office, but the office market I've found in this area has strengthened because the residential component is here. I sort of call it Google West now, west of us. Google has sort of moved in. So it's become a very dynamic area, but a key to it was that the developers could respond to a residential market.
Well,
Yeah.
also, I think the idea of live work, Leila, because
Yes, yeah.
we have, I mean, there's still showrooms here and there's still design, marketing and sales. It's the manufacturing is largely gone. But, you know, for years, young designers have said, well, why can't I just live there and have my studio? And with the light air issues, you could live there in the front and then your studio is in some of those spaces that, you know, are more restrictive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Moving on, I just want to be mindful of the time. Mike, you get the next question.
Thank you. My question is about if it's going to be building by building conversion, is there going to be some way of getting another elementary school, or how would that work? Is there a soft site available to convert to an elementary school, or do you know of anything about that?
I can tell you that in the educational realm that we've worked in, first it's got to the 3,000. We could actually do that conversion if you did 3,000 units over 10 years. You know, in Manhattan, what impact does it have on the school system, and how many students are projected? There's in this type of construction, usually there's very few public school students produced in the school system. However, that would be one thing when you go through the city's seeker process, that we do a lot of EASs, I'm sorry, environmental assessment statements, and for different agencies in the city as well as private developers, and that looks at the impacts on something like the school system. But what we have seen is where there's a need, that school system would determine that need, how they would absorb that, or whether they need a new building, or you can find buildings that have been converted.
Yeah.
So it would be something down the line, actually, to look at, and it's mandated that you look at it in the seeker process.
Yeah. Mike, does that address your question? Do you have a follow-up?
Kind of. I just think that if they wanted a 24-hour neighborhood, that they would want families with children going to school there. So, but yes, I understand the whole secret process. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Any more questions from members of the committee? Okay, just one question. You know, can you speak to the support from the garment industry itself to this proposal, and what are their views on such conversion?
Well, we haven't gone to the office stakeholders yet. And the reason we haven't is because we really wanted to go to the community boards and elected officials first to see if there was an appetite for this and a willingness to collaborate to do something to really save this neighborhood. And so, because what I can tell you is tenants don't want to come to this neighborhood anymore, the office tenants. The social disorder on the street, we have the highest crime rates in Manhattan south of 125th Street. I mean, I don't know if you walk through the neighborhood, but the amount of drug dealing, drug addicts passed out on the streets, we sweep up 65 to 100 needles a day. The methadone clinic brings in 700 people a week. So, you know, one of the things that is really scaring us at the bid, I mean, we do sanitation, security, and streetscape improvement and try and create sense of order, but these things are out of our hands. And what can we do as a bid and as a community to ensure the viability, literally the viability of the neighborhood? So that's kind of where we are now. We didn't want to get ahead of ourselves. Many of you may remember 2018, and we're not in that place anymore. I mean, we're at a place where there's really a crisis in the neighborhood that we need to solve together, because a bid can't solve it.
Yeah, no, we hear you. Let's see, do we have any more questions from members of the committee? Okay, seeing none, I am going to open up to members of the public. Do we have any comments, questions from members of the public? You can use the raise hand function to indicate that you wish to speak. If you are calling from a phone, you can dial, Mike, help me, *9.
Yeah, *9 to raise your hand and *6. Yeah.
Let's see, any questions, comments from members of the public? Okay, so seeing none, we are going to move to business session. During business session, only members of the committee are allowed to discuss the matter. This is not an action item. This is really for information purposes. I think what we need to figure out now is how do we continue to engage with the bid on this process. And I think it would be reasonable to imagine that some sort of a working group is going to be established, probably, hopefully driven by the bid. That would be my preference and my recommendation. And we can start working with the bid and getting information from them. We need to understand where the garment industry stands on this proposal, and take our cues from other rezonings that have been successful in our district, including the Ladies Mile district, and see why it worked, what was valuable, and what can we model for the garment district if indeed the garment bid decides to go ahead with this zoning action. So that would be my thoughts, but I'm very eager to hear what other members of the committee think and how we can approach this. So comments, members of the committee, any comments? Nick.
Thanks, Leila. I like your approach. I would like to stay cognizant of the concerns that we have of record. And maybe you can explain a little bit more about those now if the time is right, or at some further point as we consider this further.
What are you referring to exactly?
You said we're on record not opposing this in the past.
No, what we are opposed to is the state process, and really because of the process. The state, basically, the state mechanism, which is what Renee was referring to, would actually do what we consider to be spot zoning, where basically a non-for-profit organization that is in the business of doing building conversions into either supportive or affordable housing would basically take over one building, convert it, create additional residential density, for which we would have no tools and no opportunity to plan for school capacity, for example, or do we need a park? Is it going to increase the pedestrian traffic or the use of the subway? So this mechanism is actually what we are on record saying that we want. If we think that it is a good idea to actually bring residential to this part of our district, this is exactly the mechanism that we support. We want it to be comprehensive. We want it to have at least an EAS, but hopefully an EIS. We want it to be, really comprehensive. We want to know how many kids, how many students are going to come in. We want to know what impact it's going to have on our parks. Are there enough hospitals? Do we expect to have an elderly population that needs a senior center? We need to be able to figure out all of that at once and then advocate for that, which is why we strongly believe in, comprehensive planning rather than what the state was proposing, which, everybody was like, but we need housing. Yes, of course we need housing. And we're actually on record saying that housing is the either first or second priority in our district. So it's this kind of zoning action is consistent with our set of priorities. I am personally very encouraged with this approach, and I want to praise the garment bid for coming to us so early. I think it's it's very judicious. If we can have a cross acceptance and buy-in from the community from the get-go, that's the way to do it.
I agree. Thank you.
Awesome, great. So I don't know that we need to linger any much longer on that. What I would like to say is, I think that we should identify, a couple of members of this committee who will, work closely with the bid, with the elected officials, with the planners who are going to assist the bid in this endeavor, and when it's time to then bring this back to committee for action. Hopefully, we will have been part of the process, which I think is going to be a very productive way to approach this exercise. So, as I said, it's not an action item, so I think we can leave it at that. Once again, I want to thank Barbara for this initiative to reach out to us. We really greatly appreciate it. Frank, thank you so much for your wealth of knowledge on land use and zoning matters, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, so moving on, we are now going to discuss casinos. And the reason we are discussing casinos now is because the state legislature enacted the ability for the Gaming Commission to actually issue 3 casino licenses downstate. Currently, there are 4 casino licenses upstate, and 3 downstate are going to be cited very soon. So I asked my great colleagues, Nick, Athanel, and CJ, to actually look into the matter, and I think you guys did a terrific job, and you are ready to give us a little presentation. So take it away.
Thanks, Leila. So as an introduction to the issue, as you mentioned, in 2013, New York voters first approved legislation for casinos in the state. In April of this year, elected officials in Albany authorized up to 3 casino licenses for downstate New York, which includes New York City, Long Island, and Westchester County. The application process will be overseen by the state's Gaming Facility Location Board. After reviewing the applications, the board will make recommendations to the state's Gaming Commission, which will ultimately decide which licenses to award. The process is set up so that community input is required before state regulators even review the application. For a site in New York City, the proposal must also comply with local zoning and ULURP, and it must be approved by a local community advisory committee. For sites in New York City, the local committee would have 6 members, 1 of each chosen by the governor, the mayor, the local state senator, the local state assembly member, the borough president, and the local city council member. At least 4 of the committee members must approve of a project before state regulators can begin evaluating the application. The application process is required to open by January 6th, but we are aware of at least 3 potential operators who have already indicated interest in pursuing a casino license in our district. I read that Vornado is considering a location near Herald Square, SL Green is proposing 1515 Broadway, and Morris Bailey is looking at Herald Towers on 34th Street. That brings us to our discussion tonight. I'll pass it back to you, Leila.
Thank you, Nick, so much for this very clear explanation of the process. So we are not formally at the table, meaning that we don't have a seat on this community advisory committee. But at the same time, it is very prudent that we discuss the matter and come up with a position on whether we believe that a casino is a worthy use of space in our district, and what impacts it would have, positive or negative. So, the purpose of this meeting tonight is to start this conversation. As I said from the onset, we may decide to take action tonight, and we may also decide that it is prudent to revisit the matter so that we figure out what kind of action it is reasonable to take at a subsequent meeting, which I would anticipate would be next month. So what we're going to do is, given that we don't have an applicant and there's not really the same sequence of discovery going on, we will use our question session to actually start to think about the issues that a casino brings, the challenges that it brings to our district. And then I want to quickly open up to members of the public so that we can get a sense, and our elected officials, so that we can get a sense of the positions that stakeholders in the district may have about the siting of a casino in CB5. Renee, I saw your hand go up. Yes, go ahead.
Just to think about it, in bringing the casino, is there a certain amount of money that this is supposed to bring, or is it earmarked to bring in a certain amount of money, or jobs? I'm just trying to frame it like.
The license will go for $500 million. And it is unclear whether it is a one-off payment or whether it is for the duration of the license. The license is issued for a 10-year period. So I'm not quite sure if if they decide to renew, they have to pay again, and I'm sure I hope that that they would have to pay again, but I don't know what would be the amount. In terms of the taxes, that there's a tax structure that is in place for the upstate casinos that already exist and operate, and it would probably mirror to some extent the same tax structure.
And jobs.
Oops, sorry, I was muted. Job creation is an argument that is used to justify casinos, but it is not a metric that is mandated in the siting of a casino. They don't have to prove that they're going to create X number of jobs. But I think that you're touching on those points, and I think that CJ has done some pretty extensive research on compiling the effects of all the various reports and studies that have been done on casinos. I think that it is very fair to recognize from the onset that the impact of a casino is going to be vastly different, whether it is. Sorry, are you?
No, I didn't want you to think that I'm necessarily in favor because I was raising those points.
Oh yeah, no. I know, but they are, like the very important questions that we really need to consider and ask ourselves. But I think that casinos, have a vastly different impact in areas that have very low density compared to areas that have very high density, and in areas that have a very depressed labor market versus areas that have a very strong labor market. So I think that, I know CJ has done a lot of, and Nick have done a lot of research on that. Nick, you have your hand up, go ahead.
Leila, I would rather step on my tongue than contradict you, but in your statement about jobs, there is a requirement in the legislation that 70% of the decision is based on economic activity, including the applicant providing the highest number of quality jobs in the gaming facility.
Thank you for this clarification. Yeah, it is actually hugely important.
The legislation provides a huge laundry list of factors to be considered. And if anyone's interested, I can circulate the legislation, but it's 2-3 pages of criteria that the gaming board must consider.
Okay, great. Any other questions? And then I really want to open up to comments from members of the public. Okay, let's do that. Comments, questions from members of the public. So you can use the raise hand function if you wish to speak. if you wish to deliver any comments tonight. Julio, you're going to be permitted to speak. You can unmute yourself. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm not visible, right?
No, this is a shame. We always love to see your face, but we'll be satisfied with just reading your name and hearing
Thank
your
you so
voice.
much. I just want to say hello to everybody here on this committee, and thank you for all of your hard work. And especially want to thank you from the Schubert Organization. We had our renaming of the James Earl Jones Theater, the expansion of the previous court theater. So Community Board 5 was very helpful in that process. My name is Julio Peterson. I'm the Vice President of Real Estate at the Schubert Organization. I'm also a member of the Broadway League, which represents the theater owners, the producers, and is sort of the umbrella organization over Broadway. As you may know, we have 41 Broadway legitimate theater houses in Times Square. The Broadway League, which again encompasses the theater owners, producers, and other important folks in the industry, has collectively agreed that we do not, that we oppose this casino at 1515 Broadway. We believe that the Broadway industry is critical to making up the economic activity and the life of Times Square and the Broadway district, and that an additional casino would significantly create additional traffic, congestion. We have a lot of congestion there. The proposed site is 1515 Broadway and between 44th and 45th Street, which is the location of the bulk of our Broadway theaters. The Schubert Organization, in fact, on that block has 7 theaters. The proposed casino would require substantial construction for a significant period of time. It would require that the theater, the Minskoff, where the Lion King is currently now, be relocated. So we have a lot of concerns, especially given the type of activity that's been happening in the neighborhood, which the previous presentation was very clear. We abut the garment district, and those activities have permeated into the theater district. And so that, the congestion and all the other factors that I referenced earlier is a significant reason why the theater community, Broadway in particular, is opposing the construction of a casino at 1515 Broadway in Times Square. We do not oppose a casino in New York City, but we don't think that Times Square is the appropriate place for this casino. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Julio. I was given the following number. The Broadway industry sustains 97,000 jobs and is an economic sector that represents $15 billion with a B. It is fair to say that it is a large driver of the economy in Community Board 5, just for a little bit of economic context. Thank you so much, Julio. Are there other members of the public who wish to speak tonight? Comments, questions from members of the public? Okay, so seeing none, I will mention that we reached out to the Times Square Alliance, and they responded by indicating that they are not taking a position on this matter, and that they represent a variety of industries, and that they are following the conversation, but that at this point they don't have an official position. So yeah, I think we can move back to business session and decide among ourselves what kind of an action we want to take. Do we want to maybe follow what we just did with the garment proposal, and maybe we want to reach out to the various stakeholders and create a working group or a group with other stakeholders so that we can make a better and stronger determination next month. Do we want to take an action tonight? Do we want to further discuss? I think it would be wise to further discuss the pros and cons of a casino, but we also need to figure out what is our what do we see our deliverables as being for tonight's meeting. So I'm taking comments, thoughts. EJ, go ahead.
Sorry, this is going to be a question masquerading as a comment more to you, Layla. But can you just kind of recap or characterize to us, if we were to take a position, is it us weighing in on who and where the state should award? Is it more or less just weighing in on who and where the state should award these 3 licenses to? Or is there an actual zoning change that would be required for one of the specific locations occurring in our district? Are we weighing in on simply who the license is awarded to, or are we weighing in on a zoning change of any kind?
No, very, very good question. So I think that, the first thing we need to really make very, very clear, we're in no position to make any determinations for anything outside of our district. So, if other districts in the city or Long Island or Westchester want a casino, it is their sovereign right, and we're not going to make any recommendations. I think we're going to stick to whether we believe that Community Board 5 is an appropriate location for a casino license. Where is this recommendation going to go? It is going to go to this Community Advisory Committee. Our elected officials, certainly our council member, our borough president, our state senator and state assembly member should know what is our position. And if it happens to be in line with their views, it's going to make this view much easier to advocate for if they know that they have the support of the community board. I think it would be prudent. And if they don't, then we should tell them that how we feel about such type of views. So this is really the aim and the goal. And given that they are going to start meeting because the applications are going to be issued in January, we basically have 2 months to figure out this question. Now on the use itself, I still don't have total clarity as to whether this use is permitted altogether in our district. We had some back and forth with the Department of City Planning, and I think we have someone from the Department of City Planning. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but if he wants to raise his hand to indicate that he may have some information that he can share with us, that would be awesome. Otherwise, we can continue to follow up with some emails at a later time, but we don't really know if the use itself is permitted. CJ, go ahead.
Just to add on to everything that you were saying, been doing some research with Nick on this, and I discussed with him and Aaron. I think will be most helpful for us, given that there is still like a dearth of information on specific proposals, is to compartmentalize and discuss the tactical pros and cons of just putting a casino in the district, and then also if anyone has any morality issues. So like separating the two, and just having a hearty discussion on those from a high level, without trying to get too granular with like any specific proposals, just because we don't have that information in hand. So that's what I would recommend we use this time to do. I'm happy to kick that off at any point. I have thoughts, but
Yeah,
just putting that to Layla. Layla, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Let's hear from Mike, who has his hand up,
Yeah.
and then CJ. Yes, I would love it if you can kick that off, because I know you've done some research, and we, you know, you can sort of like lead on
Yeah.
different topics that we should be thinking about. Mike, go ahead.
Okay, well, I was just going to say my opinion was that the casinos have pros and cons, and if for us, for CB5, if they could have some mitigating factors, like somehow like moving Madison Square Garden with the construction of a new casino, or if there's an affordable housing component or something to mitigate the other negative impacts. So I don't know if these are requirements, but that's what I would like to see.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I don't think that there is any requirement in the law that was passed by the state. But CJ, why don't you walk us through the various topics that you and Nick have started
Cool.
identifying?
Yeah. So first thing I'll do is I'll caveat that you can do all the research that you want on casinos in America, and nothing directly correlates to dropping a casino directly in Midtown Manhattan. So even if we're, using comparisons, I just wanted to, caveat that. Some of the closest comparable situations are in Philadelphia. Sugar House, I believe, is the largest one there, even so, that's like on the water outside of the downtown area. Los Angeles is probably one of the better examples of a casino in a very population dense area. Detroit, New Orleans, those are probably the most applicable. In most cases, pros for casinos. So if you're talking to a casino operator or someone who is in real estate development involved with casinos, they're going to say tax revenue and they're going to say job creation. Those are going to be the two biggest pros. They are also going to point out that what people like to identify as a con frequently, and they'll say crime, is actually, I found, was not entirely true. In most situations, crime does not rise with the creation or with any type of casinos being added to a certain region. Also caveating that with, like, there are certain casinos that are in regions with high crime, but like Atlantic City, those areas had crime issues before the casinos. Those areas will probably have crime issues after the casinos. And a lot of it has to do more so with the poverty rates in those areas. Tactical cons. So this is probably going to be a lengthy laundry list, and I have a feeling that everyone's going to want to add quite a bit to this. And I know our friends at Broadway League.
Fire off.
I'll just name a few. So the main one being is casinos are great, and Layla touched on this, if you're putting them in either a region that has been decimated economically. So like if you're actually looking for some type of economic revitalization, the perfect example of that is like what happened in Detroit. Or if you're putting a casino in a more rural area where it's not going to cannibalize a lot of the other business around. So in a situation like Detroit, the retail properties around the casinos actually rose, created a lot of jobs just because jobs were fleeing the area during the financial crisis and in the decades leading up with kind of the automotive exodus. but it's just not applicable for, it's not the same for New York because we actually have the opposite problem. We have a lot of jobs that we can't fill right now. I was speaking to people in the hospitality industry. They had just opened one of I think it was either Danny Meyer or it was one of these big restaurants where I was open up a couple restaurants and they can only stay open Friday, Saturday right now because they don't have enough staff to stay open on any other days. And that's just not the type of environment that you want to drop in a large scale casino and be like, we're creating jobs. Like it's just not an issue for this district. And traffic issue, biggest one ever. Like that's the congestion it goes without saying. Piping in that kind of traffic would be both emotionally and economically devastating to everyone in the area. And then one of the pros that people might list is tourism. But that's if you believe that this one casino would really be a reason to visit New York as a tourist destination, which I don't believe. And so then you're really only considering that most of the people that are going to the casino are people from New York. And so it's not actually contributing to any type of tourism boom that we'd be hoping for. I've already talked too much, so I'll just stop with that as like an intro to this.
It's super helpful to frame the conversation. So I think that we recognize that we are quite unique, and casinos may be a valuable economic tool elsewhere, but specifically in CB5. I think that we recognize that it would cannibalize the job market. It would create additional traffic issues, and it may actually not provide its full potential. There may be other sites elsewhere. We know, for example, that Aqueduct that currently has a racino license, so it's a racetrack, and they have the slot machines. They are planning to apply for a full-on casino license. They may be, reaping the full benefits of, increased tourism in a way that our district wouldn't, because we already have a lot of tourism for, a variety of reasons. The major one being the Broadway Theater. This is actually the number one reason why tourists come to visit the city, and it is in our district. So overall, I'm going to start stating my view is that we do not need a casino in our district. It is going to have detrimental impact to other industries that are historic industries of our district. And it is not going to provide the benefits that it would if it were to be cited elsewhere. I will start tapping on the moral issue, if even we want to call it a moral issue, but we do understand, and there is tons of research that basically shows that people who patronize casinos are minority, are low-income individuals, and that they tend to come out of the casinos poorer than they were when they got in. So it is also not desirable to have a casino in our district that would provide, that would create that kind of impact on populations that may otherwise not patronize casinos, that have an impoverishing effect of those who patronize it. We know from a number of studies that addiction to gambling is a big problem in areas where there are casinos. And this is something that we don't want to create a tool of addiction under the guise that it is going to provide revenue to the state. And we have to be very mindful that the tax revenue generated by the casinos will go into the coffers of the state, meaning that, you know, these funds can be spent anywhere, and, you know, it's not revenue that is going to come directly to serve the needs of our district. So I think I've said enough. Also, I am strongly in a position of a casino being cited in within the boundaries of Community Board 5. And I would really encourage the Community Advisory Committee to do the same. Aaron.
So thank you, Leila. Just to sort of springboard off some of the things you said, which I agree with. You know, I think an interesting thing here, like you're saying, there's a real economic target to, you know, the research shows that there's, no matter what the marketing or the, you know, I'm for sure that the developers here are really going to market this as a high-end luxury resort add-on to the New York experience. But in reality, the research shows that there's going to be a lot of low-income people who patronize that type of casino. And I think, you know, sports gambling has exploded in the last year virtually. There's tons of gaming apps, you know, the floodgates are now open. And I think it is a real negative thing across the board. But, you know, with the, you know, is a brick and mortar casino in Midtown going to, you know, generate revenue? Yes, but there is so much revenue coming in from virtual and gaming apps that the state is getting a lot of revenue for. And I would love to look at those numbers, because that's proof that, you know, there is obviously pros and cons to virtual gaming, and gambling is a real serious, you know, addiction issue either way. But I think, you know, there's revenue coming in that would sort of offset the argument that this is needed revenue for the state, because there's a lot of different ways that can come in. And it'd be really curious to see, since that has been legal, you know, what those numbers look like. So it sort of puts a spin on the argument against needing a brick and mortar casino in Midtown to generate the tax revenue that wouldn't exist otherwise.
Yeah, and no, very, very, very good point. And also, furthermore, you know, those 3 downstate casino licenses are going to be cited somewhere. You know, so the question is not whether we need a casino in downtown, in Midtown Manhattan. The question is, where should one of these 3 casino licenses should go? Where are they going to be most useful and beneficial in terms of economic development? And you know, I think to your point, Aaron, you know, I think that you know, gambling absolutely generates tax revenue that's undeniable, and we also know it from the upstate casinos. I mean, the revenue is absolutely substantial for the coffers of the state. But really, you know, the question is it the best use of a casino license to put it in Midtown Manhattan, given that there are, you know, plenty of other sites, including, you know, as I said, Aqueduct. We understand that Yonkers, the racetrack, is also positioning itself. There has been talks of Coney Island, another site close to the JFK Airport. And then another one close to Citi Field. So, you know, I think we can very confidently say that, you know, the tax revenue would be generated by, you know, such casino. And, you know, the marginal benefit would be much greater if it's actually elsewhere, given that, you know, Midtown is already a very strong economic driver in New York City, and does not need this kind of you know, revitalization. Yeah, no, absolutely. Any other comments? Any diverging views? Any yeah, CJ.
So, playing devil's advocate for a second, one thing I forgot to add, I will point out, is that the casino business is one of the only industries that will almost never get tax breaks. So when they do come into a state, or they, you know, they come into a city, they are almost always the industry that is paying the most of any business in that state. So if you're in the camp of pro casino, there is a reason to, you know, put on your list. But to Layla's point, like it's just a random slush fund that can get appropriated for whatever. It's generally not earmarked for anything in particular, and it's used at the state level. To Aaron's point of them, you know, making it, trying to market, which they probably will, as like a high-end thing, and maybe putting it as a luxury hotel or having some type of, you know, entertainment venue added to it. Like you can try and do that, but the best way to do that is and what casinos try and do is they'll put table minimums, but that never works the second you put a slot machine in, and it never works the second that you have a sports desk that you can gamble on. It always ends up attracting lower income folks.
Yeah, and you know, for the 4 upstate casinos, the top revenue, you know, the largest revenue, tax revenue, is actually coming from the slot machines. This is really what, you know, what does it. And
yeah,
that,
they won't get rid of those. That's the big money driver for them.
Yeah. And you know, that targets, you know, a lower income population. Yeah. EJ.
Yeah, just a couple things. I mean, first off, I'd say we should certainly never offer any kind of tax break to one of these facilities. The city does not have a great track record of making good use of offering tax exemptions in perpetuity to giant facilities like these. I would certainly be against that. Just as one other, you know, interesting point, this is in no way me saying that I'm just, you know, straight up in favor of this, but you know, one other piece of data that I'd be interested to see, and one other comparative example that maybe hasn't been brought up yet is London. There are considerable casinos in dense areas in London. I've been to several of them. You know, I arguably, and I'd be curious to see data in terms of crime, in terms of you know, general poverty and the effect on the residential area in those neighborhoods. I'd certainly be curious to see that data in addition to some of the American cities that were mentioned. Because I do think that London is comparable to New York City in several different areas, particularly the fact that London is one of the models for New York's proposed congestion pricing, and you know, certainly when some of the traffic increases that were cited, you know, I'd be interested to find out how the casinos in London have contributed to traffic, particularly because it's mitigated in London via their congestion pricing scheme. And I'd be curious to see how it might interplay with what is planned at this point for New York City. So just some additional data that I'd be interested to take a look at.
CJ, do you have any data on that?
Yeah, I not specific one because I left most of my notes at home. I didn't make it home in time. I'm still at the office, but I did look at London a bit. It is a much more favorable environment for I don't know if that's the right way to put it. They don't necessarily, London is a great comp for like a city that has somehow managed to somewhat managed to incorporate casinos well into population dense areas, but the UK government has been cracking down considerably on casinos, specifically in London and elsewhere, but mostly in London. So I think they came out with a couple of new pieces of legislation last year that's going to dramatically affect the business activities of these casinos, or the regulatory oversight involved with making sure that they are not being as predatory as they typically are.
Yeah, and I'm not an expert, but I believe that they have a smaller footprint that what would end up being permitted in New York. I think they are much smaller.
A lot of them are basically like gentlemen's club. They call them like gentlemen's clubs, and yeah, they're much small. If you think of like the grandiose casinos in the U.S., they're very much not that. At least I've never been, but from what I researched, the other interesting tidbit is of how some cities have combated this, especially with the traffic issue, which some of you may be aware of, is the riverboat casinos. So like a place like Chicago, for example, Chicago has legislation where they are not allowed to have any casinos within the city limits, and they have a ton of casinos within like 20 to 30 miles of the city. But they also then have in Chicago and other areas in Illinois, Indiana, down in Mississippi, there's a lot of riverboat casinos, and they claim that those are much better with dealing with a lot of the congestion issues.
Okay. Renee, I see that you had your hand up for.
Oh, no, it's stupid. I was just commenting on the, in London, they have the fruit machines in the pubs anyway, so that it's not the slot machines, the gentlemen's clubs, totally different, I think, when you were talking about, it's sort of hard to compare those. I think it's going to be kind of different if you were to compare those two animals.
I think they have, I mean, it may be falling under the definition of gaming or gambling, but their method of operation is vastly different from what New York is contemplating. All right, so I think we're starting to see some sort of a sense of where the conversation is going. I don't see too much in a voice in favor, or seeing any pro arguments that we would want to highlight. The question now is really, what do we want to do? Do we want to take a vote tonight? Do we want to maybe reach out more broadly to other stakeholders? I mean, we know that, and also for the record, I should mention that we did reach out to SL Green. We have been in contact with their lobbyist, who was unfortunately unable to set up a meeting, so we have not been able to talk to them. But just for the record, I wanted to mention that we have done the outreach. They have been very public in their intention to set up a casino at this particular location. Other applicants have not. But certainly, when they do, we will do similar outreach. So that was just for the record. But then for us going forward, do we want to take a position tonight and bring it to the full board? Do we want to maybe convene a some sort of a working group with other stakeholders to get a better sense of what others in the district want to do, and what is their position? I mean, we've heard from the Schubert organization, and I think Julio was also speaking on behalf of the Broadway League, but it may be useful to speak with this particular industry more in depth. So what do we want to do? Nick.
So I think I would be more comfortable waiting to analyze specific locations. In the case of SL Green, they're definitely proposing 1515 Broadway. I think if we wanted to look at that location and provide an opinion, that would make sense. But since there are some other locations also being proposed by different applicants in Herald Square and elsewhere on 34th Street, I think it makes more sense for us to be able to give our opinion to the Community Advisory Committee, which is really where it's going to count. They're going to be looking at specific locations. I think it makes sense for us to opine on specific locations once those locations make themselves apparent. So between now and then, perhaps we can, get more information and figure out where the public stands. But until we have specific locations, I don't know that it's appropriate for us to make a formal comment.
Yeah. Okay. CJ.
Yeah, completely agree. We definitely don't have enough information in hand to make any meaningful vote. I think one approach we could take, since in the legislation, it does say that in addition to the board that is going to be put together, that each potential license applicant must demonstrate to the board's satisfaction that the applicant has acquired public support. So if we are supposed to be that, manifestation of public support, I just think we need to speak to more parties, and actually have more of a consensus before we would pretend to represent like what that public support is.
So just to make it clear, this public support will be the voice of the Community Advisory Committee. They are the ones who will fulfill this role.
Said it separately, but okay.
Yeah, they are set up specifically to fulfill this mission, to be the voice of the community, and they are, they're very specific to New York City. Other municipalities have figured out other ways of delivering public input, but for New York City, it is the structure, and it is made up of those 6 members that Nick has mentioned. It's 1 appointee by the governor, 1 by the mayor, 1 by the borough, 1 for the borough president, 1 for the city council member, 1 for the state senator, and 1 for the assembly member. So, and it requires a 2/3 vote in favor of the site, which is why, we basically, what we will do is actually inform this panel by, issuing a statement that represents the community, and we can be sure that the special interest groups will do what they do, and they're very good at it, and that's how it works. Our job here is really to represent the community. So my final question to the group is, do we want to have some sort of a statement of principles of what we see as being cons and what we see as being pros? We don't need to do it now. We can also, between now and next month, for example, come up with what we believe are, principles on which we're going to base our recommendation, and we can adopt that at the December cycle. How do we feel about that? Okay, seeing no response, I'll take this as it's not necessary. Okay, which is fine. Okay, all right. So we will not take an action tonight. I think we have we have a plan on how we're going to deal with these issues. When an actual site is identified, we will, although we're not formally required, we will opine. Someone needs to figure out actually what the timeline is going to be for the Community Advisory Committee. We don't want to be in a position where they're hastily asked to take a vote and we don't have a chance to weigh in. So we'll have to make sure we get ahead of that. But otherwise, we know what the plan is going to be in how we provide input on casinos. All right, is everybody in agreement and we're all on the same page? Okay, I see a lot of heads nodding and thumbs up. All right, excellent. So I think we can move on from this issue. I need to ask if there are any new business for tonight. Do we have any new business that needs to be considered at this committee meeting? All right, so seeing none, we are ready to adjourn. Thank you guys so much, and see you very soon. Have a good evening, everyone.